Welcome to the FounderVideo podcast, an interview series bringing you the latest and greatest info on B2B marketing, revenue operations, and go-to-market strategy from respected experts. Here is your host, Will Martin.
So today we're here after a little break for the 15th episode of the FounderVideo podcast. Today with James Hanzimanolis. Hope I pronounced that right. Founder of Outbounder, now closed, and founder of Erudite, a GTM consultancy. All the great right now on LinkedIn. So yeah, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Dude, I'm so stoked to be here. Thank you for having me on.
For sure. So first question is obvious, right? You recently shut down your outbound agency given the declining response rates after putting the SDR function under scrutiny, because I saw some of your posts leading to that, to shutting down, right? How different in terms of its impact do you think the outbound decline is for agencies compared to SDRs?
So there's a lot that made me make that switch, but I mean, for context, like outbound still works perfectly fine. And if you have good people on your team, like you can close really good business by doing it. The problem is because of this decline, these massive sales teams that you see, like I'm going to name a few. So we see like, the team over at SalesLoft, the team over at Apollo, these giant sales teams. And I just kind of wondered to myself, how is this going to be sustainable to keep hiring SDRs to pound the phones? It worked like really well back in the day. Then year after year, it just steadily declined. So that, like, again, it could still work. I just felt like there's probably better ways to generate pipeline. And a part of that is through content, running ads, doing organic socials. And that, at least in my opinion, is where the future is going to be.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agreed. And so how did that lead you to shutting down the agency? Because you were at, if I'm not mistaken, 24,000 MRR. You were doing good, right? I mean, and you had been doing it for 2 years or a little bit more than that, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, it's a big decision, right? Dropping the clients, dropping the team. I assume that there was some team there too. How was it hard for you to make the decision, and how did you deal with that, I
Yeah,
guess?
I mean, so a couple the first thing is I've been doing outbound for years, but outbounder was actually just a few months old. Uh, Getting rid of the clients wasn't that big of a deal because I had my mind made up for a while now. And even after starting the agency, deep down, I knew like this is going to be a temporary thing. Um, so it wasn't a hard decision to make at all. I I think the biggest mistake was probably starting it. I would have been better off going right into Erudite and focusing on this content marketing agency. I would have been way better off doing that. Anybody who's listening to this, if you're thinking about starting an agency or a firm or some kind of service, but you're not fully sold on it, just take some time and think about it, because I wish I could go back and not go through that. I also killed off my brand on LinkedIn. Now I have to rebuild, which sucks. But I had this whole massive following that I've accumulated over the years of SDRs and hardcore outbound salespeople. They're gone now. They're not really enjoying my content anymore. Which is fine because I'm rebuilding this new thing. But anyway, long story short, think about it before you go all in.
Totally. So how complex do you think outbound has gotten? What's required to make it work now versus 2 3 years ago? What has changed in terms of tech stack, skills, strategy? You mentioned in your LinkedIn the role of cold email specialists, clay
Yeah.
agencies, outbound growth hackers, right? How does that fit into the current landscape? And if someone was to say, right, well, we still need to do outbound. How do I do it right?
So it's a loaded question because I don't know that there's necessarily one right way or wrong way to do it. What I do know is there are definitely ways that are better than others. And like if we look at some of the worst performing ways, especially when you're looking at enterprise sized companies, they still rely on these predictive revenue models. And they base things off of, if my SDRs make this many calls, they're going to generate this many meetings, which will in turn turn into this much revenue. Never works that way ever. So that's kind of a pain. Um, I put a post out a few weeks ago, and it was titled "The Last Outbound Post I Ever Make," and it was kind of like a gimme to my audience because I hadn't given them anything really useful for a while. So I wrote down my step-by-step process, and I went so in detail. For anybody who wants to check it out, it's under the newsletter, right? So, but it goes so deep in the process of everything that's required, and it requires data scraping off of your competitors' websites, off of G2, off of anywhere you could find your target audience. You have to do a lot of enrichment work. You have to do a lot of customized personalization at scale. You have to, and it just like adds on and adds on. So it becomes so complex, and the margin for error is so small. You start to wonder, is it even worth it? There are people like Eric Noah. Shoot, I'm going to mispronounce your name, but Eric Nowaslawski. Yeah, he's got a tough last name like me, but the guy from Growth Engine X, right? Like the guy who used to be at Clay, he's got such an awesome system down because he understands how to do all this technical work that most people don't know how to do. I see sellers on LinkedIn complaining, I don't know how to use SalesNav. I don't know how to use Clay. I don't know how to use the Growth Machine. I don't know how to use this automation tool. I don't know how to use Bardeen. You got to figure it out, because if you don't, you're going to be behind. This prehistoric way of doing outbound, where it's like, hey, we have yellow pages. Let's pound through these phones and do it. It's almost a job for jockeys who are all brawn, no brain. Right. And like, I'm going to insult some people by saying that, but I mean, you look at it, these people like, stop complaining, pick up the phone. We have the numbers and data that proves it's been declining. And I used to be that guy who used to be like, nah, pick up the phone and call. It's declining. Objectively, pickup rates declining. Response rates for emails, for voicemails, declining. There are more, how do you say it? Legislations being released that prohibit certain elements of cold outreach. Like if you look at B2C, B2B salespeople B2C salespeople are no longer able to cold call. I mean, that's insane, at least in the US, which is insanity. I met with Mac Redden, who lives in Copenhagen, the CEO of Comstar. We were talking on the podcast last week. He was saying to me, like, these tools like B2B, Warmly, these website visitor softwares, I'm a big fan of them, but they're not even legal in a lot of these different countries. Europe, you can't have it. So, like the process of doing outbound has to be so careful, and it takes so much time. I'd be working on these massive Excel sheets at night where like I'm enriching data. I put out this big Google Sheets formula. It's a list of different functions you could use. It's basically like you could use Clay inside of Google Sheets. I made this whole thing. It's filled with JavaScript functions. And I spent hours building perfect lists by scraping, enriching, doing all this work to do outreach. Even with that, my numbers are lower than they used to be. And I'm better at outbound than I've ever been. Even with that, my response rate, everything is just, it's so low right now that it's virtually impossible for me to make it work. And I'm going on a bit of a rant here. I'll say one more thing too. You may have heard the story because I talk about it in like every podcast. I posted about it a few times too. I am a huge fan. I've always been a huge fan of a lot of the marketers that work in B2C or in general, just, Seth Godin's, Chris Walker's, Marty Neumeyer's, excuse me, those types of personas. I came across Seth Godin's phone number on a data tool. It's like, nah, there's no way this is actually going to be his. I called him. It rang once, and he picked up. Hello, who's this? This is Seth. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think you were going to pick up. I don't even know I'm going to ask you. I did what any normal person would have done. I asked him, like, look, man, I am the best cold caller I know. I'm great at this. I've excelled at this. I've hit these milestones, blah, blah, blah. Talking my trash over the phone about how great I am. And I was like, how do I level up my career? At this point, I admire you. I look up to you. What do I do next? And he said, you got to find a way for people to come to you instead of you going after the people. That was very profound for me. When he said that, that really hit me like a truck. And I was like, man, if I could do this at scale where I generate interest, generate demand, generate pipeline, I'll be in a much better spot. And so I went all in on that. And I started posting on socials every day. I started networking more. Within 2 months of posting every day, I basically stopped cold calling. Admittedly, I was still talking about it on LinkedIn, but I had basically stopped cold calling altogether because I was waking up to inbounds in my DMs, in my emails. I had people asking me to be on their podcast, just like how I am on yours right now. So when I realized it worked, I was all in, and I was kind of over outbound.
Of course, who wouldn't be? I like to compare it to dating in a way. When you think of the analogy, like if you compare, how outbound feels and what's the core of the activity versus how inbound feels and what's the core of doing outbound. One is attracting, the other is chasing. If you take it out of business, nobody wants to chase anything in life. Right? Especially when there's parts of the process that they don't have full control over. You only chase what you can know you're going to get, right? If there's something that's out of your control in that process of chasing, then nobody wants to chase, right? Everyone wants to attract. I will say though that most of the people that would like to attract sometimes still need to chase because they're not able to attract anyone. So that's a kind of an analogy of mine, but whatever. Do you think that has a big role into why outbound has declined so much? Do you think? Because for me, I think it's all about consciousness state. People are resistant to it. They have they had enough of it, so that's why it doesn't work anymore. It's just there's a timeline of resistance. The more you pour into the market, the more volume there has been because it's easier than ever to do volume of outbound these days. Then that just sophisticates the market in a way that makes it too resistant to feel anything in a way or be impacted by an outbound contact, right? What do you think about that?
I don't necessarily think that people are tired. I think people have always been tired of being cold called. I think what matters most is finding people who it's relevant to. Like if you could find a group of people and you're pretty sure my message is going to be relevant for them. That doesn't happen, by the way, by putting a bunch of filters into Apollo or Seamless or ZoomInfo and just hoping that, oh, this is going to work. It happens by doing a lot of research and conducting, evaluating data, scraping, doing the hard work, which again, like this takes hours of time. But if you're able to do that, if you're able to find the right people, create the right message, and reach out at the right time, then you're in a really good spot. And I would also add this, which is a lot of people think about outbound sales in a very direct response way. It's we do X to get Y. What we don't think about is what if instead of looking at outbound as, hey, let's do X to get Y, we looked at it as, hey, let's do X. And along the way, let's learn as much as possible about our account as we can. Let's document it inside of the CRM. And so what happens is you shift away from this very high volume approach and you migrate into this, it's almost like an ABM motion. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Phone Burner, I had 20 accounts I really wanted to go after. And I think I booked meetings with like 11 or 14 of them. And they were really tough accounts to break into. They were upper mid-market accounts, big names. Everybody knows them. I don't know how to break into these accounts, but I know they're a good fit. And it took so much work between talking to people at the lower end of the company just to collect data about how to reach out to the people at the upper side of the company, like C-level execs. And I'm multi-threading people. I'm doing all this work. That worked so well that I don't know if it was 11 or 14 out of the 20, but that's between a 55 to whatever 70, whatever the percentage conversion rate between outreach to a meeting. So that's a way I think people need to do it. And this idea of like pounding the phone, and I'm repeating myself here, but this idea of pounding the phone, doing the same thing every day just to get why, it's probably not the, I think people need to be a little bit more calculated, A, and then B, again, instead of looking at it as, okay, we do X to get Y, it's we do X and then we get all of these different things, right? A lot of it is info, which turns you into a strategic seller, that's what we should all be aiming for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved your concept about Pete from Mad Men, kind of SDR, right? Who's able to
the perfect
source
SDR.
their own demand, and yeah, totally. got to be socially intelligent with it, right? I think that's the wording these days. Okay, so you mentioned before, right, doing content on LinkedIn, podcasts, ads as other options, to drive inbound, of course. What do you think founder-led content? I'm going to drop names that are now super hot and like things that everyone's talking about, but few people seem to be able to figure out, right? So, what do you think founder-led content, inbound-led, outbound, well, podcasting, organic social, webinars, and partner marketing have in common, and why do they seem to be the future to a more efficient GTM?
So let's rephrase that question. And I want people to think about it like this. People look at things separately and, okay, how do we do webinars? How do we do content? How do we do, whatever, YouTube versus LinkedIn? How do we do these different things to generate pipeline? And I think that a lot of it is actually a combination. So when you start combining these things, you realize how effective they are at scale. And I also think a lot of people are very focused on the strategy behind doing it. And the problem with the formulas you see on LinkedIn or the copywriting that you see on social media is it's very formulaic. When you follow formulas, you start to lose the ability to be creative, right? That's by itself kind of problematic. And I would argue that's why I can't think of the guy's name, Eddie Schluler from Very Good Copy. Like, he's a very good example where he actually breaks a lot of copy rules, but it's really good, like really, really good. And that's why people pay attention to him. If you look at Zara, their logo breaks every rule for graphic design, and yet it's so good. Looking at these things as a founder, I would say do it to do it and expect nothing. You create all this interest around your product by being active on social media and using these different channels, and then you allow the things that to come. If you focus on formulas so much, you're going to appear exactly like everybody else. And so that is probably the last thing you want to do. When I'm working with people for Erudite, we have these conversations that are not typical about their business and their company. Like, tell me about your business. Tell me about like the biggest struggles that you've had, when you launched your business or funding your business, whatever. Tell me about the biggest wins that you've had. Tell me these stories. That's what attracts people more than going on LinkedIn and posting, here's a photo of us at our booth for this conference, or we have this new product release and nobody gives a shit because it's like for a product that nobody knows about.
Fully agreed. I liked how you framed it. Being creative, like following rules, disables you from being creative, right? Creativity doesn't understand rules. It's pure. It needs to be pure. Otherwise, it's not creative in a way. And the more restrictions you put to it, the less pure it becomes, right? Does that entail, though, and we're kind of off track here, but I think this is a really good point because we're tapping into, is organic social, inbound-led, outbound, founder-led content, all these super efficient ways to generate pipeline, is it something reserved to the founders or the executives who, quote unquote, have that inner, I want to say fire, but that intuition that enables that creativity and pushes something that's unique and that actually resonates? Because a lot of people, have done their jobs by following formulas, and it has worked for them so far. Among them, outbounders, right? In a way. So, do you think how can one then can develop that? Someone that comes from such a restricted background of following processes and numbers and repeatable workflow type stuff. Because content, I would say, it's not as repeatable. Like, you gotta sit through it.
So this is what I do. And everybody is different, so maybe follow this or don't follow this. What I used to do is I used to wake up and I used to say, okay, it's Tuesday. I need to post again today. What am I going to post about? And I would scroll through my LinkedIn feed until I saw something that resonated, and I would post my thoughts around it, whatever. The people who build a brand the fastest on social media in general are the ones that are actually doing shit in real life. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They go on social media, they say, how do I win at this? And then all they're doing is they're posting what the last 10 fucking guys said instead of posting what they are going through. I find that the people who are winning at social media are posting everything that's currently happening, with their business and their lives. If you look at the people who are succeeding, I'm going to use examples here. Adam Robinson talks about all of it, wins and losses and all. He talks about how his business failed at one point. He had to fire his sales team. All these people are out of a job. It was a crappy situation. Outbound didn't work. It's what inspired him to do our B2B. I know that story because he's talked about it so much. Admittedly, he's another example too. I've never heard about Gong before. When I broke into SaaS, I was working at a company that was old. They were selling hardware equipment. We had pickup Cisco phones that you'd talk to over the phone to do your cold calls. Never heard of anything like a Gong before. And then one day, I'm wearing my suit in a profile picture. I'm this corny ass looking guy on LinkedIn. I find Brian Lamana posting about Gong, and I'm like, this is cool. Now I know about it. So posting what you are currently going through is better than trying to find what to talk about. And if you're always finding the next hot topic, I think it's honestly a race to the bottom.
100%. Good insights. Good insights. It's getting deep.
This podcast is brought to you by FounderVideo. We'll cut your LinkedIn ads costs by at least 50% with natural-looking creatives that prospects actually want to consume. Just have an expert in your C-suite show up to a 90-minute interview once a month and let us take care of the rest. Turn LinkedIn ads from an accepted line item expense into a scalable revenue channel that fits into your go-to-market strategy. Book a free consultation at foundervideo.io.
Would you say that organic social is worth relying on? Have you been using any paid, or do you consider that? Because I think I have the vision that social is going to become a pay-to-play, even on LinkedIn and everywhere. It's just a matter of time at some point, because most platforms have become already in a way, and reaping the benefits of organic growth and impressions and reach and everything. It's first, it's not as repeatable. There's a luck part to it. There's a serendipity part to it. I wouldn't say it's luck. And over time, it will only be reserved to some that started soon enough, I think. What's your take on that? Do you think ads are going to be a key part of this later on?
I don't necessarily think it's going to be ads. I think we're seeing this already. So like, let's use X/Twitter, formerly Twitter. Like, let's look at that for an example. I really wanted that little blue check mark for like good self-esteem. So I paid the $22 per month for it or whatever it was. And then I forgot to put the money in my account one month. I had it all in one other card and my account bounced. I was like, whatever, I forgot about it. And I realized I was getting less reach. And the reason for that was because if you have that blue logo or whatever, you end up appearing in comment sections before the people who don't. I didn't know that. And then I realized after that, okay, so me spending, it's a little bit of money, it's $22 a month, has a pretty significant difference for my impressions and my engagement, as opposed to not having it. And so that's like one example of, okay, so now individual sellers are going to have to be investing into these platforms. You need LinkedIn Premium in order to send, like, these are things that are supposed, like, we don't know this for sure, but there are people who have ran tests and said, okay, I sent 100 LinkedIn messages in the past week. I didn't have premium, and now I'm showing up in spam, or now my account has been restricted. But the people who do have premium aren't going through it. And like I said, there's tests done on this stuff to prove it. And so it doesn't just rely on ads. Like, individually, sellers are going to have to start purchasing subscriptions in order to get the maximum amount of reach on these platforms. The other part of it is, so on LinkedIn, my posts, admittedly, and I've been hearing this from everyone I talk to, have been getting way less reach over the past 2 months. It's like out of nowhere, it's like I got hit by a truck and my reach got cut into like a fourth. There's this new feature on LinkedIn, it's been out for a few months, where you could promote your own posts. I see a lot of those performing pretty well because they're so subtle that often you don't even notice it's a sponsored post. I think we're going to see more of that stuff. We might even see things happen like, it says sponsored by, and then the guy's name or the company name. That might be hidden at some point, and people could boost their own post without having to actually show that it's a boosted post. There are hacks like engagement pods right now. If we're being real about it, the people who are winning LinkedIn are using them. A lot of them are. So it's very quickly becoming pay to win, basically across every platform. I think you're on point.
Yeah, right now it's pay to win. Later on, I think it will be pay to play, pay to have a chance to win, right? What you mentioned about the thought leader ads, I was about to bring it up. Of course, it's it's at the core of what we're doing for clients right now, because it fits within what LinkedIn wants as well, right? They want people creating content consistently, which wasn't a thing really 4 years ago. I don't know what the percentage is at right now, but LinkedIn is known for only having around, if that, 5% of the users posting consistently. So that's a thing that they're trying to fix. And I think thought leader ads are making it more desirable. They're making reach more desirable and more scarce, right? So therefore, people are willing to pay for boosting their posts. And in a way, it actually, can propel, especially for people that are starting out and whatnot, like it puts you in the right persona's feed if you do the targeting right at a low cost, and most importantly, in a way that feels natural. That's the most important thing, I think, right? The fact that it's so subtle that you don't realize it's an ad, and if you're doing your content properly, it shouldn't feel like an ad either, because you don't. And that's a funny thing. When you see the ads from company pages, they're so different from the content that a personal profile would post, right? It's such a different vibe. It's completely different. But what they don't realize, actually, like, people want to see what they usually are accustomed to seeing in their feed. And if your post is one of those, and it's a thought leader ad, they're going to think it's organic, right? And that opens doors to a really great experience for buyers, I think. I mean, we've experienced it ourselves. So yeah. Have you been trying them?
I have never ran paid ads for anything. Everything I've done has been 100% organic socials, and I have had incredible success with it. I can't talk to you. Incredible success with it. Again, like, this goes back to the Seth Godin story, but after I started posting on LinkedIn, literally waking up to inbounds almost every day in my inbox by posting stupid memes about cold calling, right, or whatever. Um, so, and even when we launched Erudite, I had a post that went semi-viral. I think it got like 250,000 impressions or something like that. And I booked 50 demos off of that. So if you do it right, like, organic social is just a killer.
I agree. I agree. I mean, you got to be smart about it too, right? Like, who do you comment on? Who do you follow? Who do you want to engage with your post? That also, I think, drives a lot of engagement, right? Having the right people engage with your post so that it can distribute to their audience automatically. Not to the entire audience, but at least you get some impressions there. You mentioned in a post you spent 2 months studying LinkedIn's algo, right, to understand what was going on with the reach and whatnot, and to figure out how to get more reach organically. I saw your post of the learnings, and I agree with most of them. But I would like you to go through them if you have them in mind, like the most important ones that you
Yeah.
think that you're taking right now, and that you're making sure that you action based on what you found out.
So again, anybody who's listening to this, just because you follow these rules doesn't mean that you're going to have posts blow up. And the posts that I'm writing now, like, they have better hooks. They're written way better than I used to write them. They're just simply not getting as much engagement because reach is limited, like, across the board right now. Here's what's working, at least what I noticed. This is what I can remember offhand. So the first thing, which is probably the most important, is that the first 15, 20 minutes of your post really dictate how well that post is going to perform. And so I'm not encouraging pods by any means, because you can get violated on LinkedIn. You can get in trouble for that. But I do see the guys using that winning for the most part. I think the people who aren't using it already have an awesome base of people. So we look at, like, I'll use some examples. Will Aiken is a really good example of somebody who's never going to have to use a pod because A, everybody loves him. B, he puts out better content than anyone can put out. I can't compete with that. I think he's just incredible. Um, and as soon as he posts something, he gets instant traction. Some of his posts flop too. And it's not because they were poorly written or anything. It's just because the way the algorithm is right now. So anyway, first point, first few minutes of the post is probably the most important. The second thing is using a really good hook, which is often going to be a blanket statement. You say something like, here's why cold calling is dead, as opposed to, in my opinion, I think cold calling is on the decline. The former is going to perform better than the latter. So using these obnoxious blanket statements to get attention, posting relatively far apart, ideally 18 hours or more apart, If you post too far apart, I noticed that it actually creates a bit of a decline because people start to forget about you if you post every 2 days. So I encourage people posting once a day, twice if you have something really useful to say, but make sure the hours are split up pretty well. Links in posts can decline reach, but it's only marginal. The real decline happens when it's in every post or when it's in the majority of your posts. So like when I was launching Erudite, I wanted to get as many inbound meetings as I could. I put my Calendly link in the bottom of every post. All of a sudden, my view count goes down from 15,000 to 13,000 to 10,000 to 7,000, and then drops all the way down to like 1 to 2K per post for impressions. And I stopped doing that. It's starting to go back up again, and I'm in a pretty decent spot. But if you're going to use links in your post, maybe use it for 1 out of every 5 or 6. I can't think of many more offhand. Those are probably the most important ones, but one thing to keep in mind is even following these rules, it's kind of hit or miss. Having visuals in your post is a good thing too. And LinkedIn really is turning into Facebook in the sense of commoditized information spreads faster than strategic information. If you want to put up this awesome Clay workflow that's super technical, it uses Zapier and integrates with everything, no one's going to give a shit, period. Like, you'll get a few views on it and that'll be it. But if you put up a stupid meme talking about cold calling or content creation, it's going to outperform the video of the Clay workflow way more.
Yeah, I would say that more reach doesn't mean that it will perform better necessarily for from a sales perspective, right? And from a trust perspective as well. If you say Clay workflows, you better post a Clay workflow here and there, right? Even if most people are not going to engage with it, because it relates to less people, and a lot of the people that it will relate to maybe didn't want to engage for whatever reason. A lot of people on LinkedIn, I find, there's a lot of lurkers, as in any other platform, I would say, but other platforms, people are way more active and got to be mindful of that. You mentioned X in this pod and in your LinkedIn as well as a better platform than LinkedIn. I started building an audience on X at the beginning when I started FounderVideo. And I, built it up to 1,500 followers, of which is kind of whatever. But, starting from zero, it was a big thing for me because it was the first audience that I ever built. So I did so mainly thanks to an auto DM type of post, right? Like, I made this guide on how to create X amount of clips and with just 2 hours of your time through doing what we do is guided interviews, right? And I got like 250K impressions off of that. And did pretty well, right? And I gained like 1,000 followers. But after that, I came into LinkedIn. I started, consuming content on LinkedIn, following Chris Walker, Dave Gerhardt, all of these people, Adam Robinson, whatever. And I found, and Brian LaManna, and a bunch of other people from B2B SaaS leaders, revenue, all that kind of stuff. And I found that the quality of the info was way, way better than what I could find on Twitter. Maybe on Twitter, I was on the wrong side of things, right? Who knows? Maybe I was not following the right people. But I just think on LinkedIn, these people are way more active. And on X, I don't see them as much. And you said that X, you think it's a really great platform. I agree, but, please develop.
All right, so let's break down the difference between LinkedIn and X. LinkedIn, in general, has the top thought leaders, and I think that's an objective truth. We have Kyle Coleman on LinkedIn. We have Scott Leese on LinkedIn. Those people, I don't think those people really care about X that much because LinkedIn is a professional platform and that's where they spend their time. So if you want the best of the best, those people are going to be on LinkedIn. The problem is those people only amount to an incredibly small minority on LinkedIn. I mean, it's less than 1% of a percent. It is so fractional and small. On X, on the flip side, you have a lot of people who are experts at what they do. They're really good agency owners, startup founders who are going all in. A lot more VC, private equity people, lurk around on there. And there are a lot of people who so if you want to target startups, I think X is probably the better platform just because that's where the YC guys are. I mean, that's where those people hang out. It's a cooler, younger platform. I also think that X is nice because you get penalized for a lot less. I could post 15 times a day on X. Half of them could be stupid shit posts, and I'll still get clients. On LinkedIn, I get one post a day, and if it doesn't do well, I kind of have a cloud over my head, and I'm like upset for the rest of the day. So, um, you know, right now my inbounds are pretty much 50-50 off of LinkedIn and X. X, I get to post more. I get to post whatever I want. I get drop F-bombs. I can't do that on LinkedIn. I can be very just outrageous and post the most ridiculous things and generate inbounds. On LinkedIn, I'll occasionally have really, really good performing posts and it'll drive a lot of inbounds. So that's my feedback. The TLDR of this, if you're like a startup and you're selling to agencies or small businesses, X. If you want to break into enterprise, LinkedIn or upper mid market.
Totally, and even mid market too, I would argue. But that's a really good differentiation. I feel the same way too. When I was on X, I would post way more comfortably about my private life and my thoughts and just overall the journey as well as an entrepreneur, like all that kind of stuff. LinkedIn, it's I take it really seriously because of course it's kind of like your digital CV, right? It's only work environment, and I only try to provide value. You know, play a little bit of the status game in a way because everyone does, right? The link X, yeah, I get that. That's a really good way to put it, and I agree with you that you can find you can feel more close to people on X,
I
right?
think so too. I also think that followers on LinkedIn mean a lot less than followers on X. Like I have 1.1K followers, 1103 or 4 or something like that. It's around 1100 followers on X. And those people engage with me more than my almost 11,000 people on LinkedIn. So it's 1/10 of the size. Another problem with LinkedIn too is there are people who have 30,000 followers and people are like, oh, wow, that's impressive. They just sent out 30,000 connection requests. Nothing is impressive about that. I have 4,000 and a few connections on LinkedIn, but I have 10,000 followers. And even that, a lot of people connect with you because they eventually want to sell into your account. X feels more reserved. There are a lot of anonymous accounts on X too. You can't be anonymous on LinkedIn really. So I I just when I see somebody and they have 3,000 followers in X versus somebody who has 30,000 on LinkedIn, I find the person on X to be more interesting because they had to work harder for it. And so that's yeah, and there are hacks too, like the auto DM. You're probably using like Tweet Hunter or something, or like an equivalent. I use Tweet Hunter. I
Hyperion.
love Tweet Hunter. Hyperion, right? That's a great one
I
too.
use both. Yeah.
I use Tweet Hunter. I mean, even that, you're still providing super value. So that might be a hack, but at least you're providing value. On LinkedIn, the hacks don't provide value. You're mass sending, connection requests. You're DMing people. You're using automated tools and systems, and I'm not for that. So X, admittedly, I enjoy way more.
Yeah, good. I mean, you're making me want to rejoin the platform now because it's a really good point, to be honest. And I just also the kind of effort too. I was about to ask you, right, the workflow, because I can tell that a lot of people, the people that listen to this might be thinking the same way, right? Like I'm on LinkedIn, I'm taking it super seriously. I thought the best companies would be here, and yes, they are like, but on X you can find a lot of other executives and leaders that probably younger in a lot in most cases, but there's business to do there too, right? Especially if you're selling into SMB. So um, I forgot my question. Okay, yeah. So your workflow, how do you manage both to be active on both? What's kind of like your schedule? What tools do you use? Because I find like super easier. X part of the magic too is in tweeting what you think right off the bat and kind of like being
Right.
active and not having a full schedule. But I would argue that having that schedule as a baseline, it's easier when you're active on LinkedIn already. Because a daily post on LinkedIn is all around 3,000 characters, maybe less. But from
Right.
that, you can take out 10 tweets, easy, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
At least in my case, I
So
don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
here's my current workflow. I usually kind of just ignore LinkedIn. It'll be the first thing I check in the morning to see if I got any messages or like anything important happened or whatever. But when I'm writing, I'm usually writing on X, and it's off the head posts. Just I'm thinking about this right now. Let me just write about this really quick. Or this is really pissing me off. Let me write about this on X about this problem I'm seeing in content marketing or whatever. And if something performs well on X, I usually go, oh, maybe this will do good on LinkedIn. So I'll put it on LinkedIn. And typically that's a good indicator of if this does well on X and it's a long form, I could put this on LinkedIn and it'll perform pretty much, equivalently well. Um, so as far as like my organization, honestly, dude, like, and this is a lot of people I talk to all over the damn place where it's like I'm using different, I use Tweet Hunter on for Twitter, X, whatever. And then for LinkedIn, if I do want to write exclusively something for LinkedIn, I'm working in Notion or something like that. So, or I just post directly onto the platform. Workflow is kind of all over the place, but I think the answer is when you have something specific that happens to you that you want to talk about it then and there while it's still fresh in your mind. And if you do that, you don't need to worry about scheduling content 2 weeks in advance.
Good call. Yeah, I agree. You got to be in the platform to resonate with the people that are in it in a way, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot to be talked about, takes from people that can inspire you, conversations that you want to give your take as well, people pissing you off because they're having a take that, it's outrageous or whatever, people buying into a take, but, with nuance. And then it's just, yeah, I think you cannot make it in any platform if you're not active enough in a way, right? Like I think there's no such thing as I will succeed in this platform by only spending time in creating my content and scheduling it out, especially at the beginning. Like you need to be in it, otherwise it's just right.
I mean, it's engagement, it's posting content, it's posting what you feel. It's like literally like living inside of the platform as a part of your life. Like that's where we're at in terms of social media. It becomes an extension of you. And one of the people who I won't name drop him here, but one of the people who I respect a lot, I think he's great at what he does. He's built $1 million companies, and I've talked to him quite a lot. I really respect his work. What he does is he creates these automated, like content engines for people, and he'll really work with people, come up with really good stuff. But they like realistically, they all flop. Like I've never seen one of his campaigns pull off because they all flop. And a part of that is because people think, oh, I could just have this guy create my content for me. I post it on LinkedIn. It's one and done and we're good to go. And if you do that, you're not really in the platform. Nobody cares about you because you're not engaging with anyone. You haven't developed the authority to be a thought leader, and you haven't established a facility for posting content, meaning you're not really figuring out what's working or not working, or you're not adjusting and refining. You're just throwing stuff at the wall hoping it sticks. And so creating these automated workflows where you're posting months in advance and then you check once a week, like that, I never see that work for anybody, period.
Yeah, unless you do it with paid. But then what's working, it's paid, it's not organic, right? So
right, exactly.
Yeah, totally. That's why we do LinkedIn ads. Because if we were to just do organic, a lot of people that buy organic social media services, they think that they can tick off the box without being in the platform. It's just not going to work. That's why we started doing LinkedIn ads, because we figured like, hey, like this is not something you can put on autopilot. And I would love it to work and let you put it in autopilot, but this is not the way it works, right? So can help with content for sure. An agency can help you create content and schedule it and post it and whatever, help you have a baseline. But you as the user, you as the face, you as the brand need to be in it. Otherwise, missing on a lot if you're going for organic reach, that is. Okay, so this is maybe controversial, whatever. But I saw you recently became an ambassador for ZoomInfo, right? And I never tried them, I have to say. I think, a lot of people have been talking really good about it. Some people not, about the teams and whatever. I don't want to talk shit, but they, it seems like they have really good enriching. They have a lot of features. The data seems good. But there's a lot of data providers too in this game. And, my point is, first question is you became a brand ambassador for ZoomInfo, but you shut down your outbound agency and outbound is in decline. ZoomInfo is data for outbound. What's the deal there?
It's a fair question. And I'm posting about this later today, so it's funny that you're asking about this, but I've had 3 different data vendors approach me at the same time to be a brand ambassador for them. And that was all during like the life of Outbounder when I was doing that. And so I was stoked to see it. And admittedly, I was going to pass ZoomInfo up. I was introduced to their co-pilot. I got a I can't talk. I got a sneak peek preview at ZoomInfo Copilot and was absolutely blown away. That didn't even really like seal the deal for me. Henry, the CEO, reached out to me on X and actually was talking to me one-on-one. So I'm talking to a billionaire CEO of this massive company.
On
and
X.
He's like, on X, right? And he's like, you know what, dude, just, yeah, you should try it out. It's good. You'll like it. And I'm like, I would love to. I just can't afford it. He was like, you know what? Because it's like 15 grand a year. I'm not paying that. And he's like, just take it for the rest of the year. It's yours. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going with this. I'm going to try it out. And for Outbounder, it's been incredibly successful. There are different features so like, let me break down the different features. It's got intent signals, which I've never been a fan of inside of data providers. But I'm calling people up on the phone and they're like, how the F did you know that I was looking for this? So, which I'm like, okay, that's impressive. The second thing, which is probably the more impressive thing, is there's an SEP, like a sales engagement platform that you can use with ZoomInfo. It's called like ZoomInfo Sales Engagement or something like that. I don't use it. I don't have it. But the emails and phone calls that are made through their SEP are able to be used to figure out who is likely to engage, who's likely to pick up the phone or reply to an email based on the pickups and replies they've had. So now I can filter out people who are likely to reply or pick up a phone call from the people who aren't. That increased my connect rate from 4% to 12%, which is insane. And by the way, when you're calling people who are likely to pick up, you're generating a lot more meetings too. Now, the big question is like, well, how am I still using this? The biggest problem I had with ZoomInfo, which ended up being a good thing for me, was they restrict the amount of contacts that you can pull. I'm used to pulling 30,000, 40,000 leads per month through Clay, through Seamless, through whatever software, and calling through them. ZoomInfo restricts you to 1,000 pulls per month. And I was kind of like, I have all these clients to manage. How am I going to do this with just 1,000 credits? This shifted me from doing mass volume into becoming a strategic seller. And so now I can focus on ABM selling, which that's like a whole different beast. And it's much better. I'm able to focus into key accounts and actually convert them into sales, as opposed to just calling a bunch of people and hoping it works. And so nowadays, if I want a client if I want a client for Erudite, what I do is I go in ZoomInfo, I look up the account in ZoomInfo, I look at the context in ZoomInfo, I figure out who's likely to engage, or start multi-threading the account. And using ZoomInfo Copilot lets me know how I'm doing with outreach and if people have gone back to me, who I'm leaving out when I'm multi-threading. And so I don't have to do 120 or 150 calls anymore. I can just do a little bit of work in the morning using ZoomInfo and ZoomInfo Copilot to do the work that it would have taken me like an entire day to do in the past. So that's the play for Outbound, where you have something like a ZoomInfo, which helps you strategically break into these accounts and you use it. I mean, there's nothing that can compete with that, period. And when you're using those likely to engage features too, you're getting like a 99% accuracy rate for phone number data, which is incredible. I never call the wrong people anymore. So this sounds like an ad for ZoomInfo. I'll probably, when you send this to me, I'll probably turn it into a sponsored post or something. But I cannot recommend ZoomInfo. I recommend it so much that even if you don't have an outbound team, you as a founder or as a VP or whatever, C-level exec, should have access to ZoomInfo just to help you break into the few accounts that you really want to break into, because it's going to make that just so much easier.
Never thought I would hear this. This, I mean, well, you mentioned the intent signal. So you telling me that you get leads from ZoomInfo, and just because ZoomInfo tells you that this account has intent for your service, right? Well, first off, I'm assuming it's a black box. You don't get to know how they know, right? But you telling me you call those people or you email them, and they always say like, I was actually like, how the fuck do you know that I was looking for this?
So like not exactly. So like the way they have it set up, you're right, it is kind of like a black box where you don't know what it is that they were searching or how the intent was created, which is not ideal. The flip side to that is it tells you who is doing it. If it doesn't tell you who is searching it, it tells you where they're located. So it tells you, oh, the signal came from Columbus, Ohio. You could search for the leads that only live in Columbus, Ohio and fit the persona. Um, and you can also look at the signal strength, meaning you can look up how many people were looking into the account. And if the answer is like, oh, there were 10 different people looking into this within the past 2 weeks, it's an obvious trigger to go after it. So I've tried it with, I don't want to name all the different companies, but I've tried because I don't want to bash them. And ZoomInfo doesn't want me to bash those people either. But I've tried intent signals with at least 3 or 4 different data providers, and they've all been a miss. ZoomInfo, and I'm not just saying this because I'm sponsored by them. I don't have to say this. I don't even have to say positive things about them. Their intent signals are the only ones that work. I do get people who pick up and they're like, what the F are you talking about? I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. I was not looking into content marketing. But most of the time, somebody in the company is.
And when you tell people, I just noticed that you were looking for content marketing. How do you like? I just got an intent signal from ZoomInfo. Like, how do you explain that?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Basically, I say, this is going to sound weird. I use a tool that tells me when people are looking into certain softwares or certain businesses, and it said that you were looking for content marketing. Maybe I'm like way out in left field here, man. Help me understand. Is this something you guys are currently looking for? If so, just be transparent. I want a really fair shot at working with you. But if not, that's perfectly fine. And you say it just like that. And then people will start telling you and spilling the beans. And no, it wasn't me. It was Jared over in IT or whoever. So that's the way I do it. I've heard people do it different ways.
That's interesting, man. I love that. Look, I never trusted intent signals either, right? So I guess I'll have to try ZoomInfo. You told me it's kind of pricey though, right? What's the pricing looking like for that?
I think it's like 15 grand. It might be custom pricing. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think the ballpark is around 15 grand, but there are different packages and whatnot too. So don't quote me on that.
Right. That's in theory, to not quote you, but 15 grand per year with 1,000 credits per month, right?
Ballpark. Yep.
Okay. Good. Well, audience, you now know if you want intent signals that actually work, test out ZoomInfo at least. If they have a free trial, I'll look it up and maybe I can get some kind of deal there. A lot of people complain with organic social, and I know you have a hard stop, so we can wrap up with this one. But a lot of people that start in organic social, they complain about how long it takes to make it work, right? Like, it's a 6-month game, it's a 12-month game. I sort of agree. I mean, it took me some time because I didn't have any background, I didn't have any connections. I had to build my profile up, right? I didn't get to experience the 2018, 2019, 2020 era where you could just send 30K connections and then, get the followers. Right now it's kind of limited. Or, well, I mean, you can, but you got to go at 100 a week, right? Which takes way longer than it used to take, right? So it took me some time to start getting some traction, especially, starting the podcast helped me a lot because I started posting with other people that were, notable on LinkedIn already and that were thought leaders. So that helped me a lot to get engagement and get more eyeballs to the profile. Of course, due diligence of sending connections every week. But you're telling me, right as you started, you got pretty good inbound in the first, well, it's been only 2 months, right, that you're that active on LinkedIn and you've been getting dozens of demos. So,
I've been on LinkedIn for a while, but Erudite is just 2 months old. So that's
right. I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, I know that you've been on LinkedIn for a while, but What my point is, you got a good results fairly early talking about Erudite, right? How do you think? Like, how long, in your opinion, does it take to get results through organic, or should take? And if it's long, how to accelerate it?
So anything that's hard in life takes a long time. You don't get abs overnight, right? Like that takes time, right? This is coming from a fat guy. Like you don't get abs overnight, right? So the same applies for even outbound. For the record, a lot of people think, oh, this is very direct response. And the success that we're going to have on outbound is going to be the same in month one as it will be in month two and month three. There are these performance barriers that you'll come across if you run an outbound team. And here's what ends up happening. The first month, you don't know what's going to work. So you're calling people on the phone, you're figuring out your messaging, you're refining your ICP, you're trying to collect data on specific accounts, you're trying to update the CRM, you're trying to create workflows and automations with Zapier into your CRM and the technologies that you're using. You're trying to establish a tech stack that could support your team and is within budget, and so on and so forth. That becomes a hassle. But you update these things in the second month and the third month, and things get better. The biggest impact that I've had, which separates good outbound from outbound, bad outbound, is you figure out. So, like, this is good for SaaS sellers. Like, if you're an SDR and you're listening to this, if you get anything from this podcast, learn this, because you will not win in outbound unless you do it. Figure out every single account's renewal date if they're using a competitor. And if you do that, you'll find your way to break into the account when the renewal date is coming up. So, like, one of the accounts that it took me like 9 months to break into this account was Cognism. I really wanted to win Cognism at PhoneBurner, man. I don't know if we did or didn't, but I really wanted to break into this account. It took months of talking to people over there, of figuring out renewal dates, figuring out the Boston account versus the UK account, and it was like a real hassle to break into that account. But because I knew the renewal date, because I knew the champion, because I knew the decision maker, because I knew the RevOps person that would be supporting it, I'm able to break into that account. So this is a long way of me saying outbound is a long game as well. People are upset, oh, it's going to take a long time for me to post on social media. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Your first post might be a hit. There was one guy that his first post, he was a startup founder, his first post got 1 million impressions or 1 million likes or some crazy number like that. And then he took off on LinkedIn afterwards, right? He made a successful business because of it. So if it's taking a long time, it's probably going to take a long time. It doesn't mean don't do it. You'll also get easy wins early on too. Like, there will be people who come inbound off your first 20 posts or whatever, or at least you're sparking conversations with them. Will it be as much as, 2 years down the road? Probably not. Like, but again, still do it. It doesn't make sense to not do it.
Fully agreed. Everything takes time, and like, it's, if you're asking yourself, will it take time? Then you're not kind of like, what do you want to do? Like, are you here to do anything in the long run? Otherwise, you're not winning. Like, that's not the right question to ask, I think. Instead of, how long it will take, is how can I start in how can I put my best
Exactly.
foot in front of the other, right? Like, yeah.
And
I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I actually lost an account recently, and I can't. If you're hearing this, guys, like, you know who you are. I can't help but be irritated about this. So I lost this deal, which they had this awesome company with this awesome product. It was a startup. It was YC backed. It's really stellar, and it's really one of a kind, and it's going to be a unicorn. There's no doubt about it. If they went all in on content, they would generate so many inbounds, because even the founders, like, people know who these people are. They didn't want to go with a content marketing engine because they wanted quick wins. So they hired an SDR with some guy with an MBA out of some big school. And I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, because I've been down that road before. And it's the same as always. It never plays out like you think it will. You have this idea that, oh, our product is so good, if we cold call people, we're going to generate this many meetings and generate this much revenue. It never turns into that amount. Or if it does, it's like, it's like very rare. You need to find a very good SDR to support that. Like, you want these quick wins. You don't realize how much work is going to have to go in to training that SDR who's never done the job before, learning your product for something they have no idea what it is or how it works, and then getting them to actually network and break into these specific accounts. You would be better off posting, because it's scalable. first of all, you post on social media, you educate the market at scale, and you start to generate interest, demand for your product, as opposed to doing it the traditional way of calling and hope something sticks.
Totally, man. That hurts. I saw the post on LinkedIn, right? That they told you like, yeah, we're gonna. This company tells us that our likes will have or something. Our posts will have this many likes or whatever. We want our company to have this type of engagement, like. Like they're not even caring about the quick wins or the cash flow in the long term. Like they're not in the long run and in the short term. Sorry, they're thinking about status. Like it's just I want to look good. People think that social is about that. It's like looking good or like having engagement and people faking comments, whatever. It's not about that. It's not numbers. It's connection. It's authenticity. It's relationships built. It's doors open. It's DMs like. A lot of what the good thing about social happens in DMs. That's another thing that people don't get a lot of times because again they're not in platform. They think it's something they can outsource and they can just push that. We have this new creative who spent $5,000 on. Can you put it? Can you put it on the company page? Well, people will love it, right? Whatever. Either way, good stuff. I know you you need to wrap up. So yeah, we'll leave it here. It's been a pleasure. Anything you want to shout out apart from ZoomInfo, which you already did? I think you have a pretty good ad right there. I'll send you the recording so you can make a clip about it. I'll make a clip about it and send it to you. But yeah, anything else?
That'll be a good ad. To the people who are wondering about how to create content on LinkedIn, I follow this, I guess you can call it a framework that Gary Vee uses, which is the give, take formula. Your content should either be entertaining, educating, or empowering your audience, or a combination of those things. For every 4 posts that you make that either or engage, I'm getting all my E words mixed up, empower, entertain, or educate, you should have one that's a take where you ask for something in return, and that could be a Calendly link that you put out to, generate inbound leads, and do it every day. It's not going to work right away. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It obviously works because it works for me, works for Will, works for everybody who's been doing this for a long time. Just keep doing it and figure out if this isn't working, how the fuck do I make it work? Figure it out, right? And that's my advice. Try it yourself, figure it out, and worst case scenario is you generate a brand for yourself, but you don't generate any meetings, and that's okay too.
Or even you don't generate a brand, you don't generate meetings, but you learn something about yourself. That's what I always say. Content also helps you figure out a bunch of stuff, or about yourself, about your product, about your positioning, about how you're communicating with the market. You can learn a ton of stuff on the way. That's a really good thing about content too. So yeah, man, it's been a pleasure to have you, James. We'll see you around on LinkedIn. Of course, go follow him if you don't already. And thank you for coming over. We'll hopefully have you later, maybe next year, see what's up. And it's been a pleasure.
For sure. Thanks, Will.
Awesome, man.
Thank you for listening to the Founder Video Podcast with Will Martin, and we'll see you on the next episode.